Hi everybody, welcome to the Paranormal Connection. I'm your host, Donna Wilberg. Well, on the show, we like to bring you topics that deal with the body, mind, and soul. And tonight we've got some spectacular guests that are going to be talking about Hanna Somatics, which is connection between the mind and the body. So let me introduce my guests right now. I've got Susan Koenig and Janet Hoagland. Welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm so excited about everyone hearing about Hanna Somatics because it's very exciting. So why don't you start off talking a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into Hanna Somatics and what it is.
In 1976, I became a massage therapist. I had taken training starting in 75, and I started practicing. I became a teacher of massage. I became academic director at National Holistic Institute in the decade of the 80s. And during that time, I kept hearing the name Thomas Hanna. And based on his reputation, I had never met him. I referred a number of clients that I was working with that I just didn't know how to deal with their pain issues. And they'd go see Thomas Hanna, and they'd come back and they'd say, "I'm fine." And I'd go, "What did he do?" And they couldn't really tell me what he did. So I called Dr. Hanna, and he wasn't teaching yet. And but when he did teach in 1990, I took his training, and then then he died tragically in a car accident. Fortunately, his wife, his widow, Eleanor Criswell Hanna, took over, and a group of us stayed with it and stayed around her and continued our education with her. And then we started teaching because Eleanor said, you're it. You're who's left because he's dead." So we began teaching it, and I've been doing it ever since. So I've been doing it 20 years.
Wow. Well, Eleanor was the pioneer for biofeedback.
Yes, Eleanor is one of the original, 15 people are involved in original biofeedback, and she's one of them, yes.
So what a great team. Now, Janet, you want to give us a little bit of your background? And
well, I actually, when it comes to the healing field, I'm a certified bone therapist, and I'm also a certified massage therapist, and now I'm adding on the Hanna Somatics as a certification.
Great.
I have one more semester left, and then I'll be a national certified massage therapist because everything falls under that category.
I have a feeling you're going to be so busy we're never going to see you again.
Oh, I would love that. But you'll see me often.
Well, Susan, why don't you explain a little bit to the audience what exactly Hanna Somatics is all about?
Okay. I get asked that a lot, and every time I'm asked it, it's like, how am I going to say it this time? I guess my first message is, Hanna Somatics is a message of hope. People that have been in pain, people that have stiff joints, people that are having these kinds of physical issues, this is a ray of hope for them. We call it Hanna Somatic Education because it is an educational process. It's a sensory, motor, learning process whereby we teach you to move in a certain way so that through slow, gentle movement done with awareness, you actually learn to release chronic muscular contraction. You learn to release those tense muscles and the stiff joints so that your brain can then better reorganize and coordinate you. And so it is a learning process, and it's so valuable. And what we try to do in the process of teaching you these techniques is for you to be able to know enough so that you can take care of yourself. I mean, we're available if you need to come back for, another session now and then or whatever, we're available. But really our goal is to give you the tools so that you can take care of yourself.
Well, we've brought some footage we're going to show you about that Thomas Hanna did a special on another program a long time ago.
Yes.
But it's very informative.
Yes.
And you were kind enough to share that information with us. So do you want to set up a little how we're going to be viewing this clip?
Well, you're going to be showing the actual movements he did with somebody, or you're going to, yes. Okay, so Thomas Hanna is demonstrating on a woman and is going to show you some of the exercise movements. And this is part of the daily cat stretch. Tom Hanna sort of shuffled through all the potential movements that one could do, and he picked out 7 movements. Some of them have parts, it's more like 11, movements that you could do on a daily basis. And once you learned how to do this, you could do it in a relatively short period of time. It takes me 10 to 15 minutes to do it. He says 5 minutes. I've never done it in 5 minutes, but I can do it in 10 minutes, and for sure I can do it in 15 minutes. And it goes through all the major muscles and joints of the body in not very many repetitions, in a way that as you're doing these basic fundamental movements around how the brain organizes basic general movement patterns in the body, you go through this sequence and you just start releasing all the major muscles and the muscles surrounding the joints, so that you do this on a daily basis. And I'm 65 now. I learned these when I started learning these when I was 43. I can say I practice what I preach, and my body feels great. Better than it did when I started doing this work when I was in my early 40s. So,
well, let's take a look.
Yeah. Now turn the face to the right, since that's the tighter side, right? Now, let's do this. Now, I want you to put your hand under your cheek, like that. Okay, now, just lift up the elbow slowly a few times and feel the contraction. Now, when you do that, you're contracting a few muscles, right? So you lift it again.
Parallel,
curl up, just about there. Hold it a second. Now slowly come down, just to get a sense of the rhomboid muscles, the lower trapezius muscles. Now, relax a second. Now, slowly lift up your head about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Lift it up. Now, see if you can feel, remember that earlier contraction was here. Now, lift it again and notice what you feel down to here. Can you feel the contraction down almost to the pelvis? Mm-hmm. Now, you see that I'm asking her to sense, right? To notice what she's sensing in her body. Normally, she senses very little here, except maybe a kind of a numbness and pain, because that's, here, feel.
With these basic motions of lifting the elbow, this is tight. I can feel it's quite tight.
Now, as she lifts that, she makes that tighter. But as she comes down, she's voluntarily releasing the muscles that she voluntarily contracted. Right now, these are involuntarily contracted, and they're being given a constant signal from the lower brainstem to contract. Now, we want rather than the brainstem, the top of the brain, the cortex, which is the seat of voluntary action, to take over. So what do? Now, if you want to do the full action now, you've lifted your shoulder once, and you've lifted the head. Now, inhale, Glory, and lift up head and hand and hold in the air. Now, hold that for a moment. Now, you're strong enough to do this. Now, feel how hard their heart is rocking. Feel up into here.
That is like a rock.
But Dory's doing this herself. Now, come down, Dory, exhaling, and you see how slow you can do it. Now, stop right there. Now, come down very, very slowly, so that the feedback from this voluntary release has a chance to come up. Now just relax.
This movement is like the way somebody might stretch when they're first waking up from sleep.
Yeah, well, it's all animals stretch when they wake up. All animals, all vertebrate animals stretch. And the only animal that doesn't stretch when it wakes up are adult human beings.
Okay, now that we've seen a visual of what Thomas Hanna's talk about, let's talk about how this changes everything we do, how it changes the physiology of the body itself and our capabilities.
What we're doing in this work is we're communicating with our brain. So the muscle-brain connection is in communication. Most everything we do in our life, the movements we do in our daily life, we're not thinking about them. We learned how to do them a long time ago, and we just call up our way of sitting up or sitting down or getting into bed or using a fork and putting food in our mouth. And we're doing all these movements, and they've become a habit. And we can learn good habits, and we can learn bad habits that cause pain. And so what we do in this process is we're changing those inefficient bad habits that are causing pain. So we have to contact another part of the brain. Most of the brain is here. So here's a cut. It's called a sagittal cut, right down the center of the brain. And right on this outside, the very outside of the brain is called the cortex or neocortex. This is the last, most recent evolutionary part of the brain to be developed. Everything under the cortex, all the rest of this is subcortex, and most of what we do comes out of subcortex. But when we learn or adapt, we have to involve the cortex. So if we've learned a bad habit that's causing pain, so for example, I'm sitting at the computer and my shoulders are riding up, and this is very common, maybe 99% common, and I'm typing and my head is sticking out to get closer to the screen and my shoulders are up to here, and I'm just involved in the computer hours on end. And now, the burning, the pain, the stiffness, all of that is coming in. And every time we get into the computer, in front of the computer, very quickly, we end up coming into that habitual pattern. So we have to break that pattern. And how do you break a pattern? It's really true across the board, even for a psychological pattern. You have to do something different. If you keep doing the same thing, you're not going to change the pattern. So what we have people do is slow way down, and we will actually have the person intentionally, voluntarily go into the contraction pattern. But because now you're doing it with awareness, you're doing it slowly, and you're doing it on purpose, you're doing a voluntary movement. And it takes that movement away from the subcortical regions of the brain, and it puts it into the voluntary cortex part of the brain. So we've contacted the part of the brain that is voluntary, that is learning. And we contract on purpose, we do it voluntarily and slowly, and then here's the main thing. We have the person very slowly release out of the contraction to relaxation, not yanking or pulling, and not pulling in the opposite direction, but that contraction and that slow release out of the contraction makes the cortex, and specifically the motor cortex, which controls all skeletal muscles. It controls all the tension programming in all the skeletal muscles, the voluntary skeletal muscles. By releasing slowly, it causes the motor cortex to what's called inhibit the motor firing. When you have a muscle that is contracted, it is firing. When you have a muscle that is relaxed, it is not firing. It's inhibited from firing.
Okay.
So you contract, the muscle is doing this. That slow release, intentional, very slow release, allows the motor cortex to start inhibiting more and more and more and more of the muscle fibers until the muscle fibers are as quiet as they're going to get for that round of doing that movement, and they're more relaxed. Okay. And you're doing it at the level of the cortex, so you're actually learning that those muscles are relearning how to be relaxed.
Now, what kind of steps are happening as the muscles relax? I know there's chemicals that are being inhibited when things are tight. There's all kinds of damage that's going on when you're in that state of contraction. So tell us how, as you're starting to relax, what is the rest of the body doing with this relaxed muscle?
Yes. So there's a couple of different states, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system states. Sympathetic is stress. When you're under stress, your muscles are more tense. We have more cortisol streaming through your body. You have all these biochemical and endocrine things that are happening chemically in you to keep you more anxious, more stressed. As you learn to relax through the muscular system, and that's our door, is the muscular system, you start switching from sympathetic nervous system to parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is relaxation, rest, and repair. And the biochemistry of the body changes. The hypothalamus, which controls these things, and the hypothalamus is right in here, switches from sympathetic to parasympathetic hormonal secretions. So as you relax and learn to relax, you're switching these states in your body, and you're calmer, you can think more clearly, you're not as fearful, you're not as anxious. And so when you make a positive input into the body, because the brain organizes us as a whole, we are organized holistically, somatically, the whole body, mind, and you can do body, emotions, mind, soul, body, emotions, mind, spirit. You can include as much as you want in that. We're organized holistically. A positive input creates holistic positive input into the whole body. As the muscles quiet, calm, and relax, so does the whole system.
Isn't that incredible? And I know it works. We're not going to talk about that right now, but I'm going to tell you how it works. Janet, no, how did you get started in Hanna Somatics?
Well, I actually had an accident some 20 years ago, and actually over 20 years ago. And so I had a pretty dim outlook given to me by the doctors, and from the first news I had about what I had ahead of me, it actually spurred me on to get my body back any way I could. So I pursued fields. I pursued traditional, I pursued alternative fields. And I actually got quite functional. In fact, at one point, I was asked if they could study me. Not just me, but a few other people who had had similar injury. And there was very few of us, 3 of us, that actually had moved to be functional instead of going into the format that they had ahead for people, which was within 5 years I would be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So I got to the point where I felt I was as far as I was going to go, and I did have pain that I had to live with daily, and I also had a job that I worked more than 8 hours a day. And it was a physical job because I've always been in business. And so at any rate, my thinking at that point was to always just stay on top